How in the world does a scrappy underdog startup go from babysitting a crumpled, dying rocket over the Pacific Ocean to building a $2 trillion empire? Well, welcome to this explainer on the absolute crucible of SpaceX. Today we're going to trace exactly how a ragtag team completely defied the legacy aerospace industry, somehow survived absolute financial ruin, and entirely rewrote the economics of human spaceflight. So, picture this. We're starting our story not with some huge, triumphant launch, but with a terrifying near disaster. It's September 2008. The global financial crisis is raging, and Elon Musk has just split his absolute last $30 million between a struggling Tesla and his rocket company, SpaceX. They are down to their absolute last rocket, and to get it to the launch pad, they charter a military C-17. But get this, during the descent, the plane's cabin depressurizes. The Falcon 1 rocket literally begins to crumple and implode right there in the cargo hold mid-flight. A propulsion engineer named Zach Dunn actually had to crawl headfirst inside this collapsing metal structure and manually unscrew a line just to equalize the pressure, literally saving the company by hand in the sky. So they somehow land, patch up what's left of this thing, and set it on the pad on Omelek Island. And this place is tiny. It's just a 7.9-acre coral atoll sitting out in the middle of the Pacific. This was the final stand. If this single, hand-repaired rocket blew up, the company was dead, like completely bankrupt, legally over, everybody pack up and go home. You know, you really have to ask yourself, how on earth did they end up in such a desperate do-or-die situation in the first place?
Well, to understand why this life-or-death moment happened, we have to rewind to our first section, fixing a stagnant industry. We need to see exactly what SpaceX was built to destroy.
Back in 2001, Musk was just looking around and was shocked to find out that NASA's website had literally zero plans for sending humans to Mars. The whole industry had just kind of stagnated. So his bright idea was to fly to Moscow to try and buy refurbished Russian nuclear missiles to send a greenhouse to Mars. But the meetings were just absurd. I mean, we're talking endless vodka toasts, Russian officials jacking up the prices on a whim, and reportedly even spitting on his shoes. So on the plane ride home, Musk actually pulls out some old aerospace engineering textbooks, calculates the raw material costs of rockets himself, and realizes, wait a minute, I can just build these things in-house. And this brings us to the massive, glaring issue with the old space industry. Traditional aerospace companies operated on what are called cost-plus contracts. Think about it like this. If they spent $1 billion building a rocket, the government paid them back that billion plus a guaranteed profit margin, meaning their incentive was literally to spend more time and more money. SpaceX, on the other hand, decided to operate on fixed-price contracts. If they could figure out how to build a rocket cheaper, every single dollar they saved was pure profit margin. Suddenly, the financial incentive and the engineering goals were finally pulling in the exact same direction.
So that's a great idea on paper. But how do they actually build a machine capable of pulling this off? Let's dive into Section 2, Talent, Speed, and Iteration.
You see, legacy aerospace companies were utterly terrified of failure. They'd spend years in boring committee meetings trying to design the perfect rocket in a straight, linear line. But SpaceX? They embraced iterative design, which is basically just build something super fast, test it, watch it blow up, grab the data, and do it again. When engineers would complain that a task was impossible, Musk wouldn't let them list off the limitations. He just asked his famous question, okay, what would it take?
Now, to pull off that kind of crazy speed, you need a very, very specific type of person. Musk personally interviewed the first 3,000 employees. He was hunting for brilliant, ridiculously hardworking people who had absolutely zero tolerance for corporate nonsense. I mean, everyone pitched in. Gwynne Shotwell, who would go on to become the president and CEO of the entire company, literally used to vacuum the conference room floors before government officials came over because they couldn't even afford a custodial staff.
Take Tom Mueller, for example. He was employee number 1. Before SpaceX, this guy was literally building rocket engines in his garage as a hobby. At SpaceX, he and his tiny team delivered the Merlin engine turbopump in just 13 months for about $1 million. To put that in perspective, NASA later looked at that and estimated that if a traditional contractor like Boeing had done it, it would have cost $100 million and taken several years. 1 million versus 100 million, it's just staggering.
And the whole philosophy behind that lightning speed was surprisingly simple. Musk held the roles of both chief engineer and the primary financer in the early days. He totally eliminated all those bureaucratic bottlenecks. If an engineer had a brilliant idea, they didn't have to waste a week making a PowerPoint to convince some finance guy who didn't even understand rocket science. The decision was just made, instantly, in one head.
Which circles us all the way back to that crazy do-or-die moment on Omelek Island. Let's look at Section 3, the flight that saved SpaceX.
Going into that fourth flight, SpaceX had just endured 3 heartbreaking, catastrophic failures. Launch 1 failed because of a single corroded nut. Launch 2, the stages tumbled out of control. Launch 3 was probably the worst. A tiny fraction of a second timing error caused the 2 stages to smash into each other, and it actually destroyed a payload containing the cremated ashes of Gordon Cooper, one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. Just brutal. But then, September 28, 2008. The team threw together that crumpled, hand-repaired 4th rocket in just 6 weeks, and it flawlessly hit orbit, becoming the first privately funded liquid-fueled rocket in human history to ever do so.
And because they proved their tech actually worked and reached orbit, NASA picked up the phone on Christmas Eve 2008. They awarded SpaceX a jaw-dropping $1.6 billion contract to fly cargo up to the International Space Station. With literally the stroke of a pen, a company that was days away from total bankruptcy was suddenly funded for years to come. Talk about being saved by the bell.
Surviving that crucible is what gave them the breathing room to build an absolutely untouchable economic moat. Which brings us to Section 4, reusability and Starlink economics.
Now armed with actual funding and that hyper-efficient startup culture, SpaceX developed their workhorse, the Falcon 9 rocket. NASA's own Inspector General ran the numbers and estimated that this development normally would have cost around $4.5 billion. SpaceX pulled it off for $450 million, exactly 1/10 the price. But what they were about to do next was going to break the industry completely.
For 60 years, rockets were completely disposable. Think about flying a 747 from New York to London and then just crashing it into the ocean. That's how spaceflight worked. The legacy industry said reusing rockets was physically impossible, or at least economically a terrible idea. But on December 21, 2015, a 15-story Falcon 9 booster delivered its payload into space, flipped around, flew back, and landed perfectly vertically. SpaceX figured out that reusing a booster dropped flight costs to just 10% of the price of a brand new rocket, meaning every flight after that was almost pure profit.
And that reusability unlocked their real master plan, Starlink. SpaceX uses their ultra-cheap reusable rockets to launch their own internet satellites for basically just the cost of fuel. Meanwhile, competitors like Amazon are stuck paying massive commercial rates to get their satellites into space, often literally paying SpaceX to launch them. So Starlink revenue pays for rocket development, and those rockets make expanding Starlink dirt cheap. It's this beautiful, unstoppable, self-reinforcing economic flywheel. And the scale of this is just wild. By early 2026, Starlink hit 10 million active subscribers across 155 countries. I mean, we're talking cruise ships, airlines, even militaries in active war zones use it because it's so reliable. By 2025, Starlink was generating almost 70% of SpaceX's entire revenue. They basically transformed the world's best rocket company into one of the most valuable internet providers on the planet.
All right, let's fast forward to the present day with Section 5, Starship, and the massive IPO, and see how all of this is building into the largest financial event in history.
Because all that Starlink cash, it's funding Starship, a rocket that is literally taller than the Apollo Saturn V. And they are casually pulling off stuff right now that used to be pure science fiction. During their 5th test flight, they literally caught a 30-story metal booster falling out of the sky using giant mechanical arms on the launch tower. They actually nicknamed it Mechazilla. No fishing it out of the ocean, no recovery ships, just catch it, refuel it, and launch it again.
And why does that matter? Well, back in the space shuttle era, it cost around $54,000 to send a single kilogram to orbit. Starship's internal target, $10 a kilogram, from $54,000 down to $10. Dropping the price that much doesn't just look good on a spreadsheet, it permanently changes the economics of humanity expanding into the solar system.
And when space is that cheap to access, you get some wild new business ideas. After integrating with the AI company xAI, President Gwynne Shotwell laid out this plan to build massive AI data centers up in orbit. Think about it. In space, solar power is completely uninterrupted and way more intense. And the freezing vacuum of space gives you completely free cooling for all those massive computer servers. It's brilliant.
So all of this crazy hardware success, this vertical integration, these sci-fi revenue streams, it all culminated in a huge moment in 2026. SpaceX filed for the largest IPO in financial history. They targeted an unbelievable $75 billion capital raise and a mind-bending valuation of $2 trillion with a T, cementing them as an absolute titan of modern industry.
From a tiny 7.9-acre coral island with $0 in the bank, to a $2 trillion empire,
SpaceX proved that if you change the incentive structures and flat out refuse to accept the word impossible, you can literally change the world. Which leaves us with just one final provocative question to think about today. If a scrappy startup could go from hand-repairing dented rockets mid-flight to catching 30-story metal skyscrapers out of the sky, when will humanity finally set foot on Mars?